Here Beata Silvestrek is speaking, and I'm staying in Riga, the capital of Latvia. I'm going to talk with a very kind lady. Hello, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. You are very welcome to Riga. It's always wonderful to see young, very polite and nice young people. My name is Anita Pāvulāne. In Latvian, Pāvulāne.
Pāvulāne.
In Sweden, Pāvulāns, because that's a male form. So I lived a little bit schizophrenia. In Latvia, I'm Pāvulāne. In Sweden, Pāvulāns, because that's the male form, Pāvulāns. I was born here in Riga in early 1944 during the war, and because my father and mother was against both Nazi occupation and the Soviet Russian occupation, they did some bad things. They were guerrillas, so suddenly they decided they had to fly away to freedom. But my father got captured, and mother was left with 3 children, and I was just some months old. But we managed to the coast, Kurland's coast. There we hid for 2 months by farmers in different stables, exactly like little Jesus did. We had to take shelter wherever we get a shelter. And then on the 20th of December, we managed to go aboard on a little, pretty big rowboat who took us out in the deep sea, where a Swedish fisher boat took us on board. And we managed, after 2 days, to reach the Swedish coast and freedom.
So most of life you spent in Sweden. You are Latvian, but with Latvian roots, but...
Exactly. So for 68 years, 5 months, 3 weeks and 2 days, I was Swedish.
You're counting your days in Sweden?
I counted my days, yes. So when mother also died and I had to put her beside her relatives, beside our father, the ashes, then I decided to go to Latvia and stay here for some years, because my half Swedish son already was in Latvia with a hopefully becoming wife. And yes, she is a wife now, and I have 2 grandsons.
Compliments, yeah.
Yeah. So
congratulations. And how many years did you live in Latvia before moving?
It was just 10, 11, no. I was 11 months when we came to Sweden, so we
later 1 year.
Yeah, and I wasn't in our own apartment. It was just for 6 months then we had to fly in Latvia too, and always transport somewhere else to run away from the Russians. No, the Soviets. Sorry, not the Russians. The Soviet Union.
I would like to talk about the migration, because as you can't remember your first days of migration, as you were
11 months when I come to Sweden.
How did you remember your family stories?
By tradition, they always told us, and we have to repeat it. So that was treasured. That was our fairy tales when they told about grandma and grandpa and all the living in Latvia. That was like fairy tales, and it was a sad thing too, because sometimes they started to cry.
The reasons of your family to skip from Latvia?
Yeah. We ran away. So that's a treasure they could give us, the history of our relatives, and not to forget them, never to forget them. So it was so wonderful to hear what they did when grandpa and grandmother was young, and about their parents, where they come from and what they have survived through. And
so you cultivated your roots?
Yeah, of course, yeah. I think it's very important to people, because if people lose the connection with the roots, then they can't settle down anywhere. I lived in a foreign country. It wasn't my country, but I could feel the roots to my country through these stories. And I know somewhere is a place for me. And when the opportunity was right for me to return, I took the chance. So I have been at the places where my father lived, where his parents come, but I haven't been where my grandpa, because too short of time when I had to look after the grandchildren.
So your itinerary from you lived were you born in Riga or?
I was born in Riga, yeah, but my grandparents come from 2 different parts in Latvia, and on my father's side we come from the southern part close to Lithuania, and but Grandpa went to Riga to be an electrical engineer at VEF, this big electrical factory here. He was responsible for one of them who was responsible for the electrical system.
So from Riga, because of Soviet regime, to
the coast of Kurland, and there we hid for 2 months, more than 2, and we had to fly from Riga. Mother had to be dressed like a male person with beard. My elder sister lay under this sack woven by her feet. I was put asleep with this insomnia things, so I didn't cry. And my 5-year-old brother was on the where there was a metal broken things on. It was a what's it called? A lorry. So he was hiding himself under a lot. They must make a little space for him, and there this little 5-year-old boy had to sit and shiver in October and not say a word. Can you imagine that? So mother was like theater grim. She had beard and men's clothing. And always when they have to hide, when we were lucky because when the Nazi made them, they called it combing, the seashores and all the farmers, because they knew people were trying to fly to Sweden. Then they came with dogs and then everyone had to run out in the woods and hide wherever they could. And the kids were not allowed, the children were not allowed to go together. They had to go one by one, so they don't kill each other or start to quarrel or do something. And all kids under 3 years old was put asleep with these different kinds of insomnia.
Were you hidden?
Beg your pardon?
You were hidden?
So mother had me in front in a blanket, and she always, all mothers had to, with small kids, with newborns and younger than 3 years old, had to sit with their backs against a tree. So if they shoot them from the backside, the kid wouldn't be alive and suffer from hunger and stress and darkness. So if they see mothers, the shot come in front, so the kid was killed too. Otherwise, it would be terrible for the small kids. So, but my sister and brother, they played hide and seek. But these people who came and do the combings was most Lithuanians or someone else put from the from the Nazis to come, and they were sending messages. We are coming that and that time.
So a big community of from Latvia, migrated to Sweden or also to other countries.
Yeah, very much migrated.
What years?
All they started 42 and 43, 45, 45 are the last ones, but the big rush was in 44, and some of them went with big ships to Germany because they had connections in Germany, and some of them was married with Germans, and Hitler wanted them to repatriate, to come back to them. And these ships many times was blown up by bombs.
And only young people with children?
No, all
old generations also?
Everyone who just had the possibility tried to. And it was many sad stories because these fishermen who went from Sweden to Sweden, Latvia, they did it for free, but of course they could pay sick, but they didn't want people to have too much personal belongings. So when the small boats take in water and all the people in the boats were trying to, perhaps big storm coming up, and it's exactly like in the Mediterranean Sea today. The boats can capsize and they can drown everyone. Then they have to throw their belongings aboard, and one healthy man had to throw his bag abroad, and he said, "There goes $100,000." And that was a big money those days.
Nowadays we have other inside of Europe. We have different diverse reasons to migrate, like job or to learn languages, to study. But so maybe what young generation nowadays could learn from those stories?
I think they can learn that when your life is set on a little spot and you don't know if you will survive because of the occupants, then it's better to save the life and hope to return.
What about patriotism, to protect country?
Well, of course, they who can, but Latvia was not built for protection. They didn't have that kind of army. They never thought about going fighting. They just wanted to stay inside their border and live and work and live and sing and dance. They wasn't interested of occupying another country.
How to recognize the moment to come back to the country, to the homeland?
Well, I think it was written in the cradle already. I knew all the lives that I will return. It was so natural. When the possibility was there, then I returned, because mother, because she was blind the last years and she was almost invalidized, she couldn't go to Latvia and live in Latvia. She didn't dare. It should have been too hard for her. So I promised, okay, Mama, I stay by your side as long as you want to. And it was for 18 years. I had come back to Latvia long before.
Can we say that you lived as an immigrant? More over 6 years?
Yeah. I was 68 years. I've been an immigrant outside Latvia, and I'm so happy I could return, and I hope I could stay here. But we are worried. We are worried because we call him Tsar Putin now, and he is always knocking on the door there in the eastern side, and that's not the big problem.
Does the story make circle?
The big problem is all the covered up Soviets still alive inside the society of Latvia, inside the Saima of Latvia. They are covered, old communists still alive, and they won't.
Even the generations changed.
Yeah. Even young people think that, but communists, if we go with the communists, but now they are not communists, now they are Russian imperialists, pure. So the Soviet Union doesn't exist, but the Russian imperialism to go and rape other countries, that's still there. They want the shores of Baltic Sea. So in their plans, all the Scandinavia is marked red.
How create a prosper future? How to create prosperity for the family as young people, or what young people can learn from the story from older generations?
Well, it's a sad story because it depends on our Saima, our regime in Latvia. It's not possible for many young people to live in Latvia because there's not job enough, because they are building up this countryside behind the backs of the people, and they are lying all the time. Now when I have lived here for 4 years, I can hear, that man is not a Latvian patriot, no way. He is already paid by Moscow, and that's a big fear of
how
today.
To recognize, how to be a real patriot.
Well, Lydia, my role model, say, always tell the truth and never bend to the stronger part. If you are forced to just follow the crowd because that's the easier thing, don't do that. Stand up for what's right and correct. And that's very difficult because people sometimes are willing to sell their own grandmother.
Who can fight for their human rights? How to fight for the human rights and for liberty or...
Well, I try always to tell the truth and ask for the truth. In Latvia, we still didn't get access to the papers that in the archive, why people was captured, why they were sent to prison camps in Siberia. Our Saima had decided, no, after 50 years, they almost, the white books. In every country there are a limit. After 50 years, if it's been secret and top secret, then after 50 years it becomes common knowledge. It's opened up, but not in Latvia. Lithuania and Estonia have done it. Poland have done it, as much as I know. In Latvia not. And that's because the connection with Moscow is so strong. And that's because in Riga there was more Russian than in Tallinn or in Vilnius, because here was the industrial system much better. In Estonia, in Lithuania, it was more the farmland, the farmers, and they were more stronger and more persistent against them. But in Latvians were so skilled and said, oh yeah, the good workers, and oh yeah, okay. And they didn't understand that kind of a little bit braveness that, oh yeah, we are so good, that give the Soviet system a chance to grab it all.
Can we hope for the good times, for freedom, for that you will have human rights?
So I think we have to rely and strengthen the strength of the European Union. And what I think is the most dangerous thing is the Syrian conflict. Because why don't the refugees go to Russia? No refugees go to Russia. Why are Russian weapons found in the Syrian wars and all over the world? Why just Russian equipments?
So each country has influence on the other.
Yep.
Okay, so how could we conclude with good?
Well, I think I put my trust in young people like you, to see these young people, Thai youth, sitting in the big cathedral church in Riga and singing together and praying together. Well, that was marvelous.
So let's pray together and for the good future, and the young generation can change the world.
Not doing the same mistakes as my generations did.
Learn from the story.
Yep.
So your first language is Swedish?
No, my first language is Latvian.
Of course.
And then Polish Yiddish, because Polish Yiddish women in Sweden who was taken with the Red Cross in Sweden in the refugee camps, they were looking after me. My mother, who was a doctor, was taking the health cares of people, and we moved from different refugee camps through all the Sweden. So we lived in 15, 16 places in 2 years, because Sweden couldn't take so many refugees. Many of them want to go to America or Australia, and then they must have the care expertise. So if they were tuberculosis or something other important, so they get the right medical care. And all the war trauma too.
Yeah. In fact, in total, you are trilingual or bilingual or multilingual. How would you describe?
Since we foreign languages, German and English was obligatory in Swedish school, and then we also know a little about Danish and Norwegian, because that's very close. So we had the grammar in Danish and Norwegian too, and I can read German and Norwegian. I can read them all pretty well,
understand.
But I'm not so sure that I'm speaking right. But English is a main language when studying at university. So.
Mm-hmm. And what about Swedish?
Well, that's my perfect language. That's the first educated language, because we were short of Latvian books, especially Latvian books for children. There wasn't any after the war. So the ones we get from France, they were treasures. But they wasn't so funny and so wonderful, because in Sweden we have Astrid Lindgren, we had Pippi the Longstocking.
Famous also in Poland.
Yes, all her wonderful stories. And of course the other one, Enid Blyton from England, and much funnier pictures. And well, so the Latvian books was a problem, and I felt like a half analphabetic when I was in my upper teen. I had very difficulties to speak freely some more intellectual language in Latvian. The ordinary day language. Please get that, have you done that? And so that was no problem, and all the things. But if I wanted to express my deep feelings or some theorem in Latvian language, or speak to my colleagues Latvians who live in England or America or Germany, then we went to English, because we haven't the terminologies, a special terminology.
So how have you learned Latvian?
I learned by self autodidact.
Mm-hmm.
When I divorced the Swedish husband I had, then I decided, what am I missing? And that was the Latvian language. So then I started to study each evening. I was almost 30 years old. And I started to take every book my father and mother had.
Was it easy to restart learning language in not as a child,
yeah.
not as a
yeah. It was troublesome, because we didn't have the more pedagogical grammar books. So I learned by just reading and remembering, and then I asked my mother and father as long as they lived. And then suddenly in the 17th, in some universities all around the world, in America, suddenly the Latvian, Lithuanian, Baltic languages came popular. So my daughter went from Sweden to America to study Latvian language at Michigan University in Kalamazoo. Isn't that odd? Instead of coming to Latvia, because in Latvia it was almost totally Russified. The Latvian language and literature was so destroyed especially during the Brezhnev time.
So Latvian language was cultivated, or how to say, survived or protected in the United States?
All over the world. When I understood that we who lived in asylum, the Latvians, and we keep together, and all the writteners we have. You see these grey books up there? That are our dainas, the wisdom of the people. They are 4 lines or 6 lines. Follow the mankind from the birth to the death. Everything that's according to a people's life, and how to behave to nature, to each other. And there is a wisdom. And from those I learned that this we have to keep. So, and I studied biology and environmental protection, and we had this Agenda 21. We must be very careful about things. And then I suddenly understood that we must have an Agenda 21 for all the dying cultures too.
So the culture and knowledge of the culture, or living the culture, is important to learn language.
Yeah. It's very important, languages, and also the different kind of accents, the dialects in the special regions, because as well as we save the nature with as many species as possible, then the culture, the different kinds of songs and traditions, and everything that's original from one countryside, that must be saved too. And then I get this new energy to, I speak the language so the Soviet Union know that they haven't beaten us. We survive nevertheless. And my kids started to learn Latvian too, and it's very popular. And then the Swedish society understood that the Latvian and Estonian and every foreign child has the right to know their own language at home. So they give them the possibility to study at school. They call it the home language schooling, and at least 2 hours lessons a week, and sometimes even more if there are a lot of young people, pupils. So that was a support, but I'm totally autodidact, so I learn myself.
By reading, or also listening to the radio or television?
No, radio we couldn't listen, because there was a protection zone. We couldn't listen to Latvian radio. We didn't have that kind of equipment. But I listened to old people, and memorizing all what I have read in literature, like lyrics and things like that. So, and then, of course we don't always speak correctly, but so they don't in Latvia either, because in Latvia the daily language is very much polluted with Russification. So nowadays it's half Russian and half English that comes into the Latvian languages, but that's modern life.
How many years did you put to learn perfectly or as a native the Latvian language?
Oh, I won't say I know it perfectly. I tried to have the right to use and to participate in the lessons that are for free here in Latvia for foreign people. But they listen to me and say, no, you are too good, you don't need it. So there is no level for my knowledge. So I had to continue. So I have this big grammar and word books, and now I'm studying the Latvian way. But not every night I can do it, and not every day. But I often go to the library, and I can always ask someone, hey, what do they mean with this? What's that? And I can ask Lydia, my neighbor, 91 years old. She knows it perfectly. So I always try to ask people. I'm not afraid of asking, what's the right way to say this and this?
So talking to the people, asking, it's helpful to learn languages.
Yeah.
And what's more, how long are you living now in Riga?
Well, I was jumping through and for here for the first year, but about 4 years now. So starting to get used to it.
Your profession, translator or interpreter?
Well, that comes very late. That comes when my first education was building engineering, because me and my brother, we decided that when Latvia will be free someday, then we go back to Latvia and try to build it up again, because we have seen pictures that were smuggled out and it looks terrible. And the Soviet system way of building we knew a lot about, because there have been so many accidents and catastrophes. So he decided to go the railroad water building, way road and water building, and I went the house building program. So we would be a very good team. We were too old to return and start the business here in Latvia when Latvia was deliberated. But then I went to this environmental protection, and from there I jumped to teaching, because they had two little teachers who know technology. So that was and everything in nature is connected to technique. So what's wrong technique for the nature? What is good technique? And the translation that came when the environmental protection administration was shortened. So they released a lot of people because they didn't have money for that work anymore. They thought that the Swedes know about how to live, how to circulate, and not do that and not do that, but that's not true. But they put together big regions that were self-controlled and put it to big regions, and then 180 persons had to leave the jobs, and I was one of them. Then Latvia was in need of, or Sweden was in need of translators.
Is it important to have knowledge or to have graduated from a faculty, specific faculty, or like to have specialization to switch on the translations, or it's good to know only the languages?
I think both, because if you know a lot of different topics, the easier it is to translate. Because a humanist, just a pure languagist, when one language or a humanist have to translate something in a factory or a plant or something, they're just standing, oh my God, what's that? The broader spectra, and as a translator you had to know everything about the last things in football or in sports or in music, because in the spare time when people are eating and they are not talking about these conferential things, the spare time translation is also so important, because it's then when you make the connections with people and can start to work after the conference or the meetings. So that's the more you know about the society in the countries, the better.
Have you been translating engineering texts, also biology, in medicine,
yes,
and in law?
Yes.
So how did you manage?
Because the translation I learned at the University of Stockholm in this prolonged program. So I went to Stockholm 2 Fridays and Saturdays each month for 2 years. And then we had a lot of homework and we did our ordinary jobs. But we studied in the spare time, and I could do it because my kids were grown up and I away. And then there are special topics. So there come people from the jurisprudence, from medical, from old care, from child care things. We go to museums, we go to the community, the administration system, the police, the rescuing teams. We go to farmers. So, and we go to different kind of factories to see the milk factories, for example, and translate. And we go to ministry, different kind of ministries, and get to learn.
So touching the atmosphere, touching the and the space is important.
Yeah, and all the terminology. So the different books in translation is just words, and expressions, special expressions. How they do at court in Latvia and how they do it in Sweden, it's 2 different things. In Latvia is still a lot of the Soviet system in the way, but Sweden is more to the European system, but still it's a little bit different. It's so good that it's now the European Union because it's more equal, so it's much easier to translate now because the system is so. But most things I have to translate have been according to police and traffic mistakes, and also accidents, both fatal accidents and small accidents. Very much about driving drunk, because in Latvia and the rest of Soviet Union, well, a half bottle of brandy or something the night before driving, that's no problem. But in Sweden it is. So many of them were stopped, these big car drivers. So yeah, that was a lot to do with that.
Exercises and practice is important. How to choose languages? If somebody likes a language or culture, it's important, or if how to say privileges, or if one language is famous, it's better to choose, or which languages do you translate?
Oh, well, I happen to be translating both Swedish, Latvian, English and German at the same time, because they're coming from different. Latvians living in England, they don't understand if I translate to some Swedish, and so I sometimes when we Latvians come together to help in a project in Latvia, then all the languages is needed. So they feel. So we tried, and of course the gestures. So sometimes we feel like Italians. So no, it's fun. But the most important thing I think is to be curious about things. Never stop. Never get. Oh, I'm bored of that. Oh, I already know that. Every time something new is coming up. Everything, something that you never tried before or never heard about, things you thought in school that, oh no, that's not my cup of tea, but it can be so interesting, and it's rich in the life, and you don't stagnate, or how do you express it? You don't stop breathing mentally if you're interested in many things.
Do you use dictionaries or maybe books or electronic versions?
Oh, both, everything. I listen to these audiobooks in English and in German, and now there are also in Latvian, but not so many. Because my mother was almost blind the last years she lived. She was 95 and a half year old when she died, and she couldn't read for so many years. So we took the Swedish audiobooks, and then we get the audio tapes from Latvia through the Royal Library in Stockholm. And that was very educating.
Also for translations?
Yes, oh yes. And these good audiobooks in English language, very nice. I think that improved my English better than when I went to school. But I didn't like languages when I went to school. I think, oh my God, why isn't it enough with the Swedish language? Oh, I don't want to sit with all the dictionaries. And I had very bad marks in spelling, because that was a problem, because we have different letters. We have the diacritical letters in Latvian, and I couldn't understand. But now I understand how convenient. The she sound, who can be spelled in 8 or 9 different ways in Swedish language, is just an S with this little bird on top. That's so easy. So, and I understand that in Czechoslovakia, the former Czechoslovakia, they have the same sounds, and Polish too. And languages are very interesting. I was so yesterday.
So how was the changement that you didn't like? You felt disappointed with languages. Then you enjoyed.
Yeah, and then I started when I was about 50 years old. Then I started to see the interesting things, and then the German language and the English language, when I compared the history of the languages, how the grammar changed and why it changed, and suddenly I got the tools to understand the languages better, and that's make me feel more comfortable in the language. And then I understand better what they are writing in the grammar books and things like that. So in Swedish languages, the grammar to 70% is based on German grammar, but Scandinavia, and the terminology in music and banking system comes from Italy, and the modern movie and musical things come from England, from the English language, and French language is everything with culture and theater and things like that. So it's all connected.
There are no borders to translations. You can be young or older. Everybody can translate.
Oh yes, of course. It's more the mental thing. They have nothing to do with how many years the sun has turned around. No, the sun didn't turn around, but the earth turned around the sun. No, I know people. Oh, you haven't met Lydia so much. She's 91 years old. But we say she's 91 years young, because she's so alert and she can do so much things, and she's active in everything, and she's the last one to left the parties.
And Lydia is your neighbor?
Yeah, that's my neighbor.
Yeah.
And good friend and my role model. She survived 14 years totally in Soviet prison camps and suffered a lot, but survived.
Will you continue with translations or as an interpreter too, or just with text documentations?
As long as people ask me to do, and they always do it when I'm at most occupied with other things, like celebrating Christmas or New Year's Eve or something. Then they remember, oh, this paper had to be translated. Please hurry up, hurry up. So whenever there's a chance, and suddenly if people tourists have been in an accident or something, yes, of course. So I have connections also with people in the embassy. So I had in Sweden too, I had connections with the Latvian embassy. And sometimes it must not be just accidents, it can be just social problems and things like that. So they can connect me, and then I gladly help them too.
So best wishes, and I hope you can learn and share your experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and very nice to meet you here in Riga.
Can you say goodbye, thank you in Latvian and Swedish?
Oh yeah, I start with the Swedish. Tack så mycket. God jul. Nej, inte god jul. That's gone. That was Christmas. But gott nytt år och allt det bästa inför nästa året. And thank you. Milch paldies par visu un lai jums jauns un labs gads 2017 gadā.
Thank you for hosting me.
Tack så mycket. Milch paldies.